She believed she was living the dream of every young woman in her community, a blessed marriage, a simple and faith-filled life with a man chosen by God. But what Rachel Fisher didn't know is that this marriage was in fact a carefully crafted lie to cover up a dark secret. When the truth comes out, Rachel finds herself faced with the biggest decision of her life: to remain silent like all the women before her, or to break with generations of blind obedience and become the first to speak out. What did she discover, and why did her quiet courage start a change no one saw coming? Stay with me until the end to learn how a young Amish woman transformed her own destiny and that of an entire community with just one truth and a lot of faith. I'd love to hear where you're watching from today, and if you're enjoying this, let me know in the comments. And be sure to subscribe, because tomorrow's special episode is one you definitely won't want to miss. In the quiet embrace of the Pennsylvania countryside, the sun rose slowly over the rolling hills, casting a golden hue on the fields and the simple homes of the Amish community. Rachel Fisher's heart raced with a mix of excitement and nervousness as she prepared for the day that would change her life forever. At 19, she stood at the threshold of womanhood, with the weight of tradition resting gently on her shoulders. She had spent her childhood dreaming of this moment, imagining the warmth of love and companionship that would fill her new home. As she dressed in her simple blue dress, Rachel caught a glimpse of herself in the small, cracked mirror hanging on the wall. Her brown hair was neatly tucked into a white cap, framing her face in a way that felt both familiar and foreign. Today, she would become a wife. A flutter of anticipation danced in her stomach as she recalled the way Samuel Byler had looked at her just a few days prior, the way his gentle smile made her feel cherished and adored. Today is the day, she whispered to herself, her voice barely a breath. Her mother Miriam entered the room, her hands laden with a basket of freshly baked bread. The aroma filled the air, mingling with the soft scent of wildflowers from the garden outside. "Rachel, dear, are you ready?" her mother asked, her voice steady, but laced with an unmistakable undercurrent of emotion. "I am Mama," Rachel replied, her hands trembling slightly as she reached for the basket. "I just want everything to be perfect." Miriam chuckled softly, a warm sound that instantly calmed Rachel's nerves. "Perfect is not the goal, my dear. It's the love and faith that matters. Everything else will fall into place." They descended the narrow staircase, the familiar creaks and groans of the old wood beneath their feet, echoing the sentiments of countless generations who had walked those same steps. Rachel's heart swelled with pride and tradition as she stepped into the main room where relatives and friends had gathered. It felt like a scene pulled from a cherished memory, and yet it was a moment she was living. As the ceremony began, Samuel stood at the front of the room, his dark hair slightly tousled, his blue eyes reflecting a mix of excitement and nervousness. He wore a simple black suit, the fabric slightly worn but lovingly cared for. When their eyes met across the room, Rachel felt a rush of warmth. This was the man she would build her life with, the man she had dreamed of since childhood. "Rachel, do you take Samuel to be your husband?" the bishop asked, his voice resonating with authority as the congregation watched with bated breath. "I do," Rachel replied, her voice steady and clear, filled with the conviction of her faith. The couple exchanged vows, promises woven with threads of hope and devotion. As they spoke, Rachel felt as though the world around them faded away, leaving only the two of them in that sacred moment. The simple ceremony was filled with heartfelt prayers, the blessings of family, and the warmth of community. Later, as the celebration unfolded with laughter, music, and the clinking of plates filled with homemade food, Rachel felt enveloped in a cocoon of love. She shared glances with Samuel, each one filled with unspoken vows of support and companionship. The dance of joy and tradition swirled around her, grounding her in the familiar rhythms of her life. But as the night wore on and the shadows lengthened, Rachel caught sight of Miriam standing at the edge of the gathering, her expression unusually serious. The older woman seemed lost in thought, her eyes clouded with something Rachel could not decipher. The fleeting moment of connection sent a shiver down Rachel's spine, but she brushed it aside, focusing instead on Samuel and their new beginning. That night, as they retreated to their shared bedroom, Rachel felt a mixture of excitement and anxiety. The room was adorned with fresh flowers and new linens, the air heavy with the scent of lavender. She had imagined this moment countless times, but as she glanced at Samuel, she noticed a tension in his posture that made her heart ache. "Are you all right?" she asked softly, taking a step closer to him. Samuel turned to her, his features softening, and for a brief moment, "I'm fine, Rachel. Just a little tired from the day, I suppose." She nodded, feeling a flicker of disappointment. The warmth she had hoped to share felt just out of reach, as if a veil separated them. Pushing aside her worries, she leaned in, hoping to bridge the distance. "I know today was a lot, but we're married now. We can face anything together." He smiled faintly, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Yes, together." As they settled into the unfamiliar rhythm of married life, Rachel's mind buzzed with dreams of what their future would hold. She envisioned a cozy home filled with laughter children and the simple joys of a life shared. But as the days rolled on, a heaviness began to settle in her heart, a shadow that lurked just beyond her consciousness. The following days were filled with routine chores and the comfort of familiar tasks, but Rachel couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. The warmth she had felt during their wedding seemed to flicker like a candle in the wind. Samuel was distant, his eyes often clouded with a burden she couldn't understand. "Samuel," she ventured one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon. "Is there something on your mind?" He hesitated, the silence stretching between them until it felt almost unbearable. "No, Rachel, it's nothing." But it was everything. Rachel sensed it in the way he avoided her gaze and the way he seemed to carry the weight of the world on his shoulders. As the sun set, casting long shadows across the fields, Rachel felt a gnawing unease. She wanted to reach out to draw Samuel into the warmth of their newfound love, but the distance between them felt insurmountable. Days turned into a week, and with it came the realization that her dreams of a blissful marriage were clouded by an invisible fog. Rachel's heart ached with the questions she dared not voice. What was it that lay between them? What burden did Samuel carry, and why did it cast such a shadow over the love they were meant to share? In the quiet corners of her mind, Rachel began to wonder if the life she had always envisioned was slipping through her fingers. The silence weighed heavily on her, and she couldn't shake the feeling that the truth was lurking just out of reach, waiting for the right moment to surface. It was then that she knew she had to confront Samuel, to delve into the depths of their marriage and uncover the secrets that lay hidden beneath the surface. And with that resolve, she took a deep breath, steeling herself for the conversation that would change everything. Rachel stood at the threshold of her grandmother Eleanor's dilapidated home, her heart racing with a mix of fear and hope. The place was cloaked in shadows, the walls sagging under the weight of years and secrets. She hesitated for a moment, the memories of her childhood flooding her mind, the stories her mother had shared about Eleanor, the woman who dared to question the unyielding traditions of their community. Could she really find solace here? With a deep breath, Rachel pushed the creaky door open, the hinges groaning in protest. The dim light inside revealed a sparsely furnished room filled with the scent of aged wood and lavender. A quilt frayed at the edges lay draped over a worn-out chair, and Rachel felt an inexplicable connection to the fabric that had weathered many storms. "Rachel." Eleanor's voice, though weak, pierced through the stillness of the room. The old woman sat propped against a pile of cushions, her silver hair framing her face like a halo. "Come in, child." "Grandma," Rachel replied, stepping into the room. She felt the warmth of her grandmother's gaze envelop her, a stark contrast to the chill of fear that had settled in her bones. Eleanor motioned for her to sit. "You look troubled. What brings you here?" With a shuddering breath, Rachel sank into the chair opposite her grandmother, the weight of her heart pressing heavily against her ribs. I don't know what to do, Grandma. Samuel, he..." Eleanor raised a hand, silencing her gently. "I know, I've heard whispers. The community is small and secrets are hard to keep." Rachel's eyes filled with tears. "He married me to cover up for another woman. I thought I was fulfilling my destiny, but now I feel like I'm part of a lie." Eleanor leaned forward slightly, her expression softening. "Many women have been where you are now. I too was once silenced by the weight of my own truth." "What do you mean?" Rachel asked, her curiosity piqued amidst her pain. Eleanor's eyes clouded with memories, a flicker of something deeper surfacing. "Years ago, I spoke out against the injustices I saw within our community. I witnessed women suffer in silence, bound by traditions that crushed their spirits. I had a voice, but I was not allowed to use it. When I did, I was cast out, excommunicated for daring to question the status quo." Rachel's heart raced. "But how did you find the courage to speak at all?" "The same way you must find yours," Eleanor replied, her voice steady. "Courage is not the absence of fear, but the determination to act despite it. You must learn that your voice has power, Rachel. It can heal or it can hurt, but it can no longer remain silent." Rachel nodded, her heart swelling with a mixture of admiration and fear. "But what if I'm wrong? What if I ruin everything? Then you will have taken a step toward honesty, and that is worth more than preserving a lie," Eleanor said firmly. "Your heart knows what is true. Trust it." As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the room, Rachel felt a flicker of resolve ignite within her. She shared her fears with Eleanor, the whispers of the community, the pressure to conform, and her growing anger toward a system that stifled her spirit. Eleanor listened attentively, nodding in understanding. "You are not alone, Rachel. Many women before you have faced similar trials, and many will continue to do so if no one speaks up. You have the chance to change that." "But how?" Rachel asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "What can one person do against so many?" Eleanor smiled gently. "One voice can become many. Speak your truth, and you may find others ready to join you. You will inspire them to break their silence too. It will take time, but change begins with a single word." Rachel felt the weight of her grandmother's words settle over her. "What if I'm not strong enough?" "You are stronger than you know," Eleanor replied, her voice unwavering. "You have already shown strength by coming here. Now you must take the next step." The conversation lingered in the air long after Rachel left her grandmother's house. She walked home, beneath the vast Pennsylvania sky, the stars beginning to twinkle above her, each one a reminder of the countless stories and struggles woven into the fabric of her community. As she approached her own home, Rachel felt the familiar twinge of anxiety gnawing at her stomach, the weight of her decision pressing down like a storm cloud. What would Samuel say? What would her mother think? Would the community turn against her? But the words of Eleanor echoed in her mind, igniting a flame of courage she hadn't known was there. Days passed, and Rachel found herself in a whirlwind of emotions. She began to gather her thoughts, practicing what she would say. She confided in her closest friends, whispering her fears and her newfound resolve. To her surprise, rather than recoiling, in shock, they leaned in their eyes wide with understanding and support. "Rachel, you deserve to be happy," said Lydia, her voice filled with warmth. We will stand by you." "It's not just about you," added Miriam, her tone earnest. "It's about all of us. We've all felt the weight of tradition." Rachel felt the swell of solidarity among the women, an invisible thread connecting them all. The conversations grew bolder, and as they spoke, Rachel began to see a glimmer of hope. Perhaps she wasn't just fighting for herself, but for all the women who had ever felt voiceless. One evening, as she sat in her room, Rachel decided to write down her thoughts. She poured her heart onto the pages, crafting a speech that would encapsulate her fears, her truths, and her hopes for change. She wrote about the pain of living a lie, the burden of silence, and the strength that comes from embracing one's truth. The following week, with trembling hands and a racing heart, Rachel stood before a gathering of the community. She had called upon the elders and the women of the congregation to listen. The air was thick with tension, and she could feel the weight of their gazes upon her. "Thank you for coming," she began, her voice steadying as she took a breath. "I have something important to share, a truth that has been hidden for too long." As she spoke, she felt the energy shift in the room. The words poured out of her like a river breaking free from a dam. She spoke of her marriage, of the truth behind Samuel's decision, and of the silence that had suffocated so many women in their community for generations. "Silence is not a virtue," she declared, her voice rising with passion. "We must break free from the chains of obligation and shame. We owe it to ourselves and to each other to speak our truths." The room erupted. In murmurs, some in shock, others in agreement. Rachel pushed through the noise, her heart racing as she continued. "We cannot allow fear to dictate our lives any longer. We deserve to love freely, to choose our paths without judgment." As she finished, the silence that followed felt monumental. Rachel stood there breathless, awaiting the response that could change everything. Then slowly a hand rose in the back of the room. It was her mother. "I have been silent for too long." Her mother's voice broke through the tension, trembling yet resolute. "Rachel is right. We must find our voices for ourselves and for those who came before us." The dam had burst, and one by one other women began to speak. Their words flowed like a tide, each story weaving into the next, revealing the hidden struggles they had all endured. Rachel felt the weight of their shared pain, but also the power of their collective voice, rising in defiance against the silence. Rachel stood in front of her grandmother's modest home, the wooden door slightly ajar, an invitation wrapped in uncertainty. She hesitated, her heart racing, as the weight of her recent discoveries pressed down on her chest like a heavy quilt. The world outside felt foreign, every sound magnified. The chirping of crickets, the rustle of leaves in the gentle evening breeze. It was as if the universe held its breath, waiting for her next move. Rachel took a deep breath, steeling herself, before stepping inside. Eleanor was seated in a faded armchair, her frail frame wrapped in a patched quilt. The room was dim, illuminated only by the soft glow of a single lantern flickering on a small table. Dust motes danced in the air, caught in the light, and the scent of herbs and old wood enveloped Rachel, igniting a mixture of nostalgia and apprehension. "Rachel." Eleanor greeted, her voice a whisper, yet filled with warmth. "I've been waiting for you." "Grandma," Rachel replied, crossing the threshold, her voice trembling. I don't know where to begin." Eleanor's eyes, sharp and discerning, despite her age, searched Rachel's face. "You've been through much already, haven't you? Sit with me." She gestured to a chair opposite her, and Rachel obeyed, sinking into the cushion which felt both foreign and familiar. "Samuel. He didn't marry me for love," Rachel confessed, her voice breaking. "It was all a lie. He was forced to marry me to cover up for Miriam. I thought I was fulfilling God's plan, but I was just another pawn." Eleanor's expression softened, a mixture of sympathy and understanding. "Oh, my dear, the chains of silence can be more suffocating than the strongest rope. I've lived through my own silence, and I know how it can wrap around you, squeezing the breath from your lungs." Rachel swallowed hard, the dam of emotions threatening to burst. I don't want to live like this, Grandma. I feel trapped and I don't know how to break free. Everyone expects me to keep quiet to play my part in this facade. Breaking free is not easy, but it is necessary. Eleanor said, a fire igniting in her eyes. You must choose to speak your truth. It may feel like a rebellion, but it is a rebellion born of love. For yourself, for others who suffer in silence. Rachel leaned forward, the weight of her grandmother's words resonating within her. But what if they don't listen? What if they turn against me? Then you will have given them the opportunity to see the truth, and that is a gift. Eleanor replied, her voice steady. You cannot control their reactions, but you can control your courage. You've already taken the first step by coming here. As the sun began to set, casting a golden hue through the window, Rachel felt a flicker of hope. How do I even begin? I'm just one voice against many. Every voice begins as one, Eleanor encouraged, her eyes twinkling. You have the strength of your ancestors behind you, the strength of all those women who have been silenced. They are waiting for someone to speak up to break the chains. You must be that voice. Rachel took a deep breath, the air thick with determination. I want to talk to the other women. I want to know if they've faced the same struggles, the same fears. Eleanor nodded approvingly. That's the spirit. Start small, share your story, and listen to theirs. You'll find that you're not alone in this fight. The more truth you share, the more you will uncover. Will you help me? Rachel asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Of course I will. But remember, Rachel, I can guide you, but you must walk the path. Your journey is your own. Eleanor replied, her gaze unwavering. As Rachel prepared to leave, her heart felt lighter, a sense of purpose blooming within her. She stood at the door, turning back to Eleanor. Thank you, Grandma. I wish I had come to you sooner. Time is a tricky thing, my dear. It often teaches us what we need to learn at the moment we are ready, Eleanor said, her voice soothing. Now go and remember, courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision that something else is more important than fear. With newfound resolve, Rachel stepped back into the twilight, the world feeling a shade less oppressive. She had a mission, now a flicker of rebellion igniting within her. Over the next few days, Rachel began to reach out to the women in her community, starting with her closest friends. They met in hushed tones in gardens and kitchens, their conversations blossoming, amidst the scent of freshly baked bread and blooming flowers. Each woman had a story, and as they shared, Rachel realized the depth of their shared struggles and the common thread of silence that had bound them. Rachel, are you sure about this? Her friend Lydia asked one afternoon, kneading dough with flour-dusted hands. What if the men find out? They might not take kindly to us talking about these things. I can't stay silent anymore, Lydia, Rachel replied, her heart pounding in her chest. If we don't speak up, nothing will change. We owe it to ourselves and to those who suffered before us. Lydia looked around, as if ensuring no one was eavesdropping. I've felt trapped too, Rachel. My marriage is, well, it's not what I thought it would be. I want to be part of this change, but I'm scared. Scared is okay, but we can't let fear dictate our lives, Rachel said, her voice resolute. We need to support each other. Together we can be stronger than the silence that has held us captive. As the women began to gather, Rachel felt a growing sense of solidarity. They shared their experiences, their laughter mingling with tears, and with each story the bonds between them strengthened. They spoke of love, heartbreak, and the weight of expectation that pressed heavily on their shoulders. One evening, as they sat in a circle, Rachel spoke up, her voice steady. I believe we should hold a gathering. We can invite the men, the leaders of our community, and share our truths. It's time we stop hiding. Gasps echoed around the circle, and a heavy silence fell. But what if they get angry? Miriam, another friend, whispered, her eyes wide with fear. Rachel met her gaze unflinching. We owe it to ourselves to be heard. If we remain silent, nothing will ever change. We have to try. After much deliberation, the women agreed, a spark of hope igniting within them. They began to plan the gathering, each woman taking on a role, their fear transforming into determination. Rachel felt a sense of empowerment wash over her. She was no longer alone, no longer trapped in the shadows. As the day of the gathering approached, Rachel's heart raced with a mixture of excitement and anxiety. She knew the risks, but she also understood that change required courage, and she was ready to embrace it. She would not only speak for herself, but for all the women who had been silenced for too long. In the early morning light, as Rachel prepared for the gathering, she glanced at her reflection in the window. She looked different, not just in appearance but in spirit. The weight of her decisions felt lighter now, and the path ahead seemed illuminated by the truth she was ready to share. With each step toward the community hall, Rachel felt her resolve hardening. She was not just Rachel Fisher anymore. She was a voice for those who had been silenced, a beacon of hope in a world overshadowed by fear. And as she entered the hall, surrounded by familiar faces, she knew that whatever happened next, she was ready to stand for her truth. Rachel stood at the center of the dimly lit meeting hall, her heart pounding like a drum against her ribs. The air was thick with tension. The community's elders, the anciens, sat before her with solemn expressions, their faces a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. It was a rare moment, one that twisted the very fabric of tradition and expectation. She could see Samuel seated in the back, his eyes narrowed with disbelief. The weight of the moment pressed heavily upon her shoulders, but Rachel felt a flicker of resolve ignite within. "Thank you for gathering here today," she began, her voice steady despite the quaking in her hands. "I stand before you not to complain, but to reveal a truth that has lingered in the shadows of our community for far too long." Silence enveloped the room, thick and suffocating. The elders exchanged furtive glances, their expressions unreadable. Rachel took a deep breath and continued, "I have learned that silence often hides pain, and that pain has a name, Miriam." A murmur rippled through the audience, and she noticed several heads turn sharply in Samuel's direction. He shifted uncomfortably, and Rachel pressed on, her voice rising with emotion. "Miriam is a young woman from our community, a woman who has borne the weight of shame and secrecy. She is pregnant, and her life has been uprooted because of our traditions that prioritize reputation over truth." Rachel's heart raced as she spoke, fueled by a mixture of fear and determination. The faces of the elders were stoic, but she sensed the undercurrents of disbelief swirling around her. "Samuel and I were married under false pretenses. His family forced him to marry me to save face, to maintain their honor, while Miriam was sent away to hide her shame." "Rachel, you must watch your words," one of the elders, Elder Fisher, interrupted, his voice low but firm. "This is not the time for gossip or slander against a respected family." She held his gaze, her determination unwavering. "This is not gossip, it is the truth, a truth that has been buried for too long. I refuse to be complicit in the continuing cycle of silence that harms our women and children. I refuse to stand by while we pretend that everything is fine when it is not." Samuel finally spoke, his voice strained. "Rachel, you don't understand the consequences of your actions. You'll bring shame upon us all." "Shame," Rachel echoed, her voice rising. "What about Miriam? What about the shame she must bear alone? We must speak her name and acknowledge her pain. This cannot continue." The room fell silent again, the weight of her words hanging heavily in the air. Rachel felt as if she were standing on the precipice of a new reality, one that could either shatter the old ways or reinforce them with a crushing force. She glanced around the room, searching for a glimmer of support, a flicker of understanding. Then to her astonishment, a voice rose from the back, a familiar, gentle tone. "Rachel is right." It was her mother Anna, who had been sitting quietly, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "We have turned a blind eye to so much pain, and for what? To maintain an image, to uphold traditions that hurt our daughters." The murmurs intensified, and Rachel felt a surge of hope. "Mama," she whispered, her heart swelling with gratitude. Anna continued, her voice gaining strength as she spoke. "I too have watched women suffer in silence, feeling trapped by their circumstances. I have seen mothers bury their pain to protect their children, but at what cost? We must break this cycle together." A few more voices joined in, hesitant at first, but gaining courage as they echoed Anna's sentiment. "I had a friend," one woman said, her voice trembling. "She was forced into a marriage that brought her nothing but sorrow. And I knew a girl who left after her husband betrayed her," another added. "She felt she had no choice but to stay quiet." With each confession, the room seemed to shift. The atmosphere crackled with a new energy, the kind of energy that comes from the shared understanding of a common struggle. Rachel looked at the elders, who sat wide-eyed, their authority challenged in a way they had never anticipated. Elder Fisher cleared his throat, but before he could speak, Rachel pressed on. "We must acknowledge these stories. We must create a space where women can speak freely without fear of punishment. We can't allow our traditions to silence our hearts any longer." Just when Rachel thought the tide was turning, Samuel stood up abruptly, his face a mask of anger. "This is madness. You're all being led astray by this rebellion. We have to uphold our values, not tear them down. We must protect our community's honor." "Honor?" Rachel shot back, her voice fierce. "What honor exists in hiding the truth? What honor exists in forcing someone to bear shame alone?" The tension in the room was palpable, and for a moment it seemed as if the very walls might collapse under the weight of their shared truths. Samuel looked around, his expression shifting from anger to uncertainty, and for a brief moment Rachel saw a flicker of doubt in his eyes. Elder Fisher finally spoke again, his voice steady but laced with concern. "We need to consider the implications of what you are saying, Rachel. Change is not something we take lightly. This community has thrived on its traditions. But at what cost?" Rachel implored, her heart racing. "We cannot continue to allow fear to dictate our actions. If we want to be a community that truly embodies love and faith, we must embrace honesty, even when it is uncomfortable." As she spoke, she felt the weight of Eleanor's teachings echoing in her mind. Faith is also courage. She realized that this moment was not just about her and Samuel, it was about all the women who had been silenced, all the voices that had gone unheard for far too long. Then, unexpectedly, another voice rose from the shadows. It was Miriam's mother, a woman, who had always kept her head down in the community. "My daughter deserves to be heard," she said, her voice shaky but resolute. "She deserves to be treated with dignity, to not live in fear of judgment. I stand with Rachel." The room fell into a stunned silence, and Rachel could hardly believe what she was hearing. One by one, more women began to speak up, their voices growing stronger and more united. "We will not remain silent. We will not accept this anymore." As the tension in the room shifted, Rachel felt a wave of relief wash over her. They were finally breaking free from the chains of silence, and together they were forging a new path. "Let us not punish the truth," Elder Fisher finally said, his voice quieter now. "Perhaps it is time to listen and reflect on our practices. Maybe we need to find a way to address these issues openly rather than hiding them away." Rachel's heart soared as she realized that the seeds of change had been planted. The truth had been spoken, and it was beginning to take root. As sunbeams filtered through the dusty windows of Eleanor's small, cluttered home, casting warm, golden hues across the worn wooden floors, Rachel sat on an old chair, the fabric of her dress rustling as she shifted nervously. The air was thick, with the scent of dried herbs hanging from the beams, a reminder of the life Eleanor had once led within the community before being cast out. She could hardly believe she was here seeking counsel from a woman the community deemed a pariah. Eleanor leaned against the table, her frail frame wrapped in a faded shawl, her silver hair tied back in a loose bun. Despite her age, her eyes sparkled with a fervor Rachel had not seen in a long time, not even in her own reflection. "You're brave to come, child," Eleanor said, her voice soft yet firm. "Braver than most women in our community." "I don't feel brave," Rachel admitted, her voice barely a whisper. "I feel lost. What am I supposed to do now? I can't go back to pretending everything is fine. I can't live a lie." Eleanor nodded knowingly, as if she had walked this path long before Rachel ever had. "You must first understand that the truth can be a heavy burden to carry, but it is one worth bearing. What happened to you, to Miriam, it's not just your story, it's part of a larger tale, a tale of silence that has gone on for generations." Rachel's heart raced at the mention of Miriam. "But what if I'm wrong? What if telling the truth only brings more shame and suffering to our families? I can't bear the thought of hurting anyone." "Sometimes, Rachel, the truth hurts," Eleanor said, her eyes narrowing as she leaned closer. "But sometimes silence can be even more painful. Look at what has happened to you. You were married under false pretenses. You deserve to know your own worth beyond the roles that have been assigned to you. And so does Miriam." Rachel's gaze dropped to her hands, where her fingers nervously picked at the hem of her dress. "But what can I do? I'm just a girl. What power do I have against the anciaux and their traditions?" Eleanor straightened, her expression shifting to one of determination. "You have the power of your voice. You have the power to speak, to share the stories that have been hidden in the shadows. You are not alone. If you find the courage to stand, others will stand with you." The words resonated deep within Rachel, awakening something long buried, a flicker of hope. "But how do I even begin?" "Start by gathering the stories," Eleanor advised. "Talk to the women in your life. Listen to their truths. When you collect enough voices, you will find strength in numbers. Your courage will inspire others." As the evening sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the room, Rachel felt the weight of Eleanor's words settle upon her. She thought of the other women in her community, who, like her, might be holding on to secrets, fears, and untold stories. "I can do that," she said slowly, determination glazing her eyes. "I can talk to them." "Good." Eleanor smiled, a glimmer of pride lighting her features. "But remember, Rachel, it is not enough just to listen. You must also share what you learn. You must bring those stories to light." Rachel nodded, the enormity of her task swirling in her mind. "But what if they won't believe me? What if they think I'm just being rebellious?" "Then you will. Show them that you are not rebelling against your faith or your people. You are advocating for truth and justice." "There is a difference," Eleanor replied, her voice resolute. "Our faith is not meant to keep us in chains, but to set us free." Rachel took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her grandmother's encouragement. Her heart raced with a mix of fear and exhilaration. "And what about you, Eleanor? What will you do?" Eleanor's expression softened as she looked at Rachel, a flicker of sadness passing over her features. "I will be here for you, my dear. I have fought my battles and I have paid my price. Now it is your turn to fight yours. You are stronger than you know." Over the next few days, Rachel took Eleanor's words to heart. Each evening she returned to her grandmother's house, listening to stories of pain and resilience from women who had once been silenced. She sat with her mother's friends, her aunts, and even the elderly neighbors who had lived through hard times. Each woman had a tale, Some of heartbreak, others of quiet rebellion, but all shared a common thread, the struggle against the unyielding expectations of their lives. One evening, as Rachel sat with her Aunt Ruth, the weight of her aunt's sorrow hung thick in the air. "I remember when I was your age," Ruth began, her voice trembling slightly. "I was in love with a man, but my father arranged my marriage to another. I felt trapped, like I was suffocating." Rachel leaned forward, heart racing. "What did you do?" "I married him," Ruth replied, tears glistening in her eyes. "I thought I had to, but I lost myself in the process. I tried to be the perfect wife, but I was so unhappy. I wish I had spoken up, wish I had had the courage to say no." Rachel felt a pang of empathy for her aunt. "You're not alone, Aunt Ruth. So many women feel this way. I've been talking to Eleanor, and she believes we can change things. We can speak out." Ruth looked at Rachel, surprise flickering across her features. "Do you think that's possible? Could we really change anything?" "Yes," Rachel said, a newfound strength echoing in her voice. "If we stand together, we can bring our stories to the anciens. We can show them that silence is not a virtue, and that our truths matter." Ruth considered this, her brow furrowed in thought. "If you are willing to speak, I will stand beside you." That night, their conversation ignited a spark within Rachel. She could feel the momentum building, a wave of support from the women who had been waiting for someone to lead them. As she walked home, her heart swelled with hope. Her thoughts drifted back to Eleanor. The old woman had been right. Rachel's voice could be the catalyst for change. The more she spoke, the more she realized that even the smallest act of bravery could ripple through her community, giving others the courage to break their silence. As she reached the threshold of her home, she paused, looking back at the fading sun setting over the fields. The shadows of the past loomed large, but a new dawn was breaking on the horizon. Rachel felt a sense of purpose wash over her. She would honor the stories of those women, and she would not let their voices be forgotten. With every step she took, inside, she felt that she was not just returning to her home. She was stepping into a new chapter of her life. A chapter filled with hope, courage, and the promise of a brighter future. She was ready to embrace her role not just as a daughter, but as a voice for those who had been silenced for too long. Eleanor sat in her old rocking chair, the wooden frame creaking softly as Rachel entered the dimly lit room. The smell of lavender and sage filled the air, a comforting scent that reminded Rachel of her childhood visits. She paused at the threshold, her heart heavy with the weight of the world outside, but Eleanor smiled warmly, her eyes sparkling with a wisdom that belied her frail appearance. "Come in, Rachel. I've been waiting for you," Eleanor said, her voice a gentle caress against the turmoil swirling within Rachel. Taking a deep breath, Rachel stepped inside the door, creaking behind her as she closed it softly. She felt a rush of nostalgia and fear all at once. "I don't know what to do, Grandma. I feel so lost," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Eleanor motioned for her to sit. "You are not lost, my dear. You are merely at a crossroads." She leaned forward, the light catching her silver hair, making it glow. "Tell me everything." As Rachel recounted the events of the past weeks, the wedding, the revelation of Samuel's betrayal, the suffocating silence of their community, Eleanor listened intently, nodding at the right moments, her expression a blend of empathy and understanding. Rachel's voice trembled as she spoke of the weight of the secret she now carried, the burden of another woman's pain intertwined with her own. "When I first learned about Miriam, I thought I would break," Rachel confessed, tears welling in her eyes. "I thought my marriage was a blessing, but now it feels like a prison." Eleanor's gaze softened, and she reached out, taking Rachel's hands in her own. "You are stronger than you know. I once thought I could not speak up, that silence was my only option. But I learned that silence can be a prison too. It is time to break free, Rachel. But how? Rachel's voice wavered, filled with uncertainty. What if I bring shame to my family, to Samuel, to the community? Shame is a tool of control, Rachel. It's used to silence those who dare to speak the truth. But you must ask yourself, what is more important, maintaining the facade or living in authenticity? Eleanor's voice was steady, filled with conviction. Rachel felt a flicker of defiance stir within her. But what if they turn against me? What if I am excommunicated like you? Eleanor smiled gently, her eyes dancing with an inner fire. Then you will know that you stood for something greater than yourself. You will discover that there are more voices out there than just the ones that echo in fear. Your voice can be the spark for change. Change. The word hung in the air like a promise. Rachel closed her eyes, envisioning a future where she could speak without fear, where other women could share their stories without shame. But how do I even begin? Start with honesty, my dear. Speak your truth, but do so with love. You are not here to incite rebellion. You are here to open hearts. Your words can heal, can mend the wounds of generations. Rachel opened her eyes, gazing at her grandmother with newfound determination. I want to do this, but I'm scared. The idea of confronting the elders, of standing in front of them and sharing my story, it terrifies me. Eleanor squeezed her hands reassuringly. Fear is natural, but courage is not the absence of fear. It is the decision to act in spite of it. You are not alone in this. Remember, there are others who share your pain, who have felt the weight of silence. When you find the courage to speak, you may be surprised at who stands beside you. Rachel's heart raced as she considered her grandmother's words. What if I fail? What if no one listens? Then you will have tried, and that is more than what most will ever do. Change takes time, and sometimes it starts with just one voice. Look at me. I faced the community years ago, and while I was cast out, I found my purpose. It led me to help others outside of our walls. Eleanor's voice softened, and she added, You have the power to inspire, to awaken hearts that have been sleeping for too long. Rachel's thoughts raced as she weighed Eleanor's encouragement against her fear. She thought of Miriam, of the girl who had been sent away, silenced by shame and obligation. Could she bear that weight alone? Could she speak for both of them? I want to do this, Grandma, Rachel said finally, her voice stronger now. I want to stand up for Miriam, for all the women who have been silenced. Eleanor's eyes sparkled with pride. That's the spirit, my child. Begin by speaking to the women in your life. Share your truth. Listen to theirs. Build a network of support. Together you can create a chorus that cannot be ignored. The thought filled Rachel with a new sense of purpose. I will talk to my mother, to my aunts, to the other women in the community. I need them to know they are not alone. Yes, and when you feel ready, gather them. Create a space where stories can be shared openly. The elders may resist at first, but the truth has a way of breaking through even the thickest walls. Rachel nodded, her heart racing with anticipation and fear, but also with hope. She could feel the stirrings of change within her, a desire to break the cycle of silence and shame that had haunted their community for generations. Thank you, Eleanor. I don't know what I would do without you. You would find your way, my dear. You are my granddaughter after all. You carry the strength of our ancestors within you. Eleanor's smile was warm and reassuring, and Rachel felt a sense of peace settle over her. Rachel stood up, looking around the room, taking in the faded photographs and the memories that lingered in the air. I will do this, she said, her voice steady. For Miriam, for the women who came before me, for the woman I want to become. Eleanor nodded, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. And I will be here cheering you on from the sidelines. Remember, every journey begins with a single step. Now go and let the truth guide you. As Rachel stepped out of the house and into the crisp evening air, she felt a surge of resolve. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, she felt empowered to walk it. Her heart raced with anticipation, not just for the confrontation that lay ahead, but for the possibility of a new beginning. Not just for herself, but for all the women who had been silenced for too long. Rachel stood in her grandmother's dimly lit living room, the air thick with the scent of herbs and old wood. Eleanor, frail yet vibrant, sat in a well-worn rocking chair, her fingers deftly weaving a small basket from dried grass. The room was cluttered with remnants of the past, old photographs and faded quilts that told stories of resilience and defiance. Rachel felt a mixture of comfort and anxiety as she prepared to share her heart. "Grandma?" Rachel began her voice, trembling slightly. I don't know what to do. Samuel, he didn't marry me for love. He married me to cover up a mistake." Eleanor paused, her weaving her sharp blue eyes piercing through the haze of uncertainty enveloping Rachel. "What do you mean, child?" Rachel took a deep breath, her heart racing as she recalled that fateful confrontation with Samuel. He told me that he got Miriam pregnant. They sent her away to avoid scandal. I thought I was marrying for love, but it was all a lie. I don't know how to live with this." Eleanor's expression softened as she set the basket aside. "You are not the first to be caught in the web of silence, Rachel. I too faced my share of lies and shame. There is strength in your voice, but it takes courage to use it." "But what if I speak out?" Rachel's voice cracked. "What if I bring shame to my family, to the community? The shame lies not in your truth, but in the secrets that bind us." Eleanor replied, her voice steady and firm. "I was excommunicated for speaking out, but I do not regret it. The silence may seem safe, but it suffocates us." Rachel felt a wave of fear wash over her. "But I don't want to be alone, Grandma. I don't want to be cast out like you." "You won't be alone," Eleanor reassured her, reaching out to clasp Rachel's hands in hers. "I am here, and I will stand with you. There are others who feel as you do, but they need someone to lead the way. Your courage can ignite a spark of change." Tears brimmed in Rachel's eyes. "But what if they don't listen? What if they turn against me?" Eleanor leaned closer, her voice a whisper filled with urgency. "Then you will know who truly stands with you. The truth is a powerful ally, Rachel. It can heal wounds that seemed impossible to mend." Rachel felt a flicker of hope amidst her despair. "You really believe that?" "I do," Eleanor replied with conviction. "But you must be willing to bear the weight of that truth. It will not be easy, but it will be worth it." As Rachel looked into her grandmother's eyes, she saw a reflection of her own fears and hopes. The path ahead was fraught with uncertainty, but the thought of silence felt far more suffocating than the fear of speaking out. She took a deep breath, the air filling her lungs with a new resolve. "Okay," she said, her voice steadier now. "I will speak. I will tell them." Eleanor smiled, a mixture of pride and warmth radiating from her. "Good. But remember, you are not just fighting for yourself, you are fighting for those who cannot speak. For Miriam, for all the women who have been silenced for too long." Rachel nodded, the weight of her decision settling around her shoulders like a heavy cloak. She felt a strange mix of fear and empowerment, as if she was standing on the edge of a precipice ready to leap into the unknown. As the days passed, Rachel began to gather her thoughts. She found herself reflecting on the conversations she had had with Eleanor, the stories of women who had suffered in silence. Each visit to her grandmother's house became a sanctuary, a place where she could unearth her fears and find the courage to face them. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low in the sky, casting a warm glow over the fields, Rachel sat with Eleanor, preparing for what lay ahead. "I need to talk to the other women," Rachel said, her determination building. "I want to know if they feel the same way I do. I want to know if they're ready to stand with me." Eleanor nodded, her gaze steady. "That is wise. Start with those you trust. Speak to your mother, your sisters, and the friends you hold dear. You may be surprised by what you find. They may have stories of their own." Rachel thought about her mother, the quiet strength she had always admired. "Do you think she will understand?" Eleanor's expression softened. "Your mother has lived under the weight of silence for many years. She may need time, but truth has a way of breaking through the strongest barriers." With newfound resolve, Rachel made her plans. She would speak to her mother first, then to the women in her circle. Each conversation felt like a step into uncharted territory, but she was ready to take those steps. The following Sunday, after the church service, Rachel found her mother in the kitchen kneading dough for the week's bread. The familiar scent of yeast and flour filled the air, grounding Rachel. As she approached, "Ma," Rachel began, her voice softer than she intended. "Can we talk?" Her mother looked up, wiping her hands on her apron. "Of course, dear. What's on your mind?" Rachel hesitated, the weight of her thoughts pressing down on her. But Eleanor's words echoed in her mind, urging her to be brave. "I need to tell you something about my marriage, and about Samuel." Her mother's brow furrowed with concern. "What is it?" With each word, Rachel felt a sense of liberation and terror. She spoke of her conversation with Samuel, his confession, and the truth about Miriam. As she shared her heart, she watched her mother's expression shift from worry to shock, then to something deeper, understanding. "Rachel," her mother said slowly, "I had my suspicions, but I never knew for certain. You must feel so lost." "I do," Rachel admitted, tears brimming in her eyes. "I don't know what to do, but I think we need to talk to the other women. We need to stop the silence." Her mother sighed, a heavy weight settling on her shoulders. "It's not easy, my dear. I know what it's like to keep quiet to protect the family name. But if you feel this deeply, perhaps it is time for a change." Rachel caught her breath, hope igniting within her. "You really think so?" "I do," her mother replied, her voice steadying. "But you must be prepared for what may come. Not everyone will welcome your truth." Rachel nodded, her heart racing. She knew the path ahead would be fraught with challenges, but with her mother's support she felt more resolute than ever. As they stood together in the warm glow of the kitchen, Rachel realized that the journey to find her voice had begun, and she was no longer alone. With her mother by her side, she felt emboldened to confront the silence that had bound them all for far too long. The days turned into a blur of whispered conversations and shared stories among the women of the community. Rachel learned that many had lived under the same oppressive weight of secrecy, each carrying their own burdens. One evening, as Rachel sat with a group of close friends, she sensed an unspoken bond forming among them. They shared their experiences, their fears, and their hopes for a future where their voices could be heard. "Do you ever wonder how many of us have suffered in silence?" Rachel asked, her heart racing. A friend named Anna spoke up, her voice trembling but resolute. "I always felt like I had to keep my head down to be the good wife and daughter, but I'm tired of it." "We all are," Rachel affirmed, her heart swelling with solidarity. "If we stand together, we can change things. We can break the silence." And just like that, the flicker of hope ignited into a flame. Rachel felt empowered by the voices of the women around her, each one contributing to a chorus of courage that resonated deep within her heart. As the days passed, Rachel prepared for the upcoming meeting with the elders. She knew it would not be easy, but with Eleanor's wisdom and her mother's support, she felt ready to face whatever came next. She had found her voice, and she was determined to use it, not just for herself, but for all the women who had been silenced for far too long. Rachel stood in the dimly lit room of her grandmother's old house, the faded wallpaper peeling at the corners like the layers of her own identity. The air was thick with the scent of musty books and the faintest whiff of lavender, which Eleanor had always favoured. As she looked around, Rachel felt a bittersweet ache in her heart. This was the place where her grandmother had once fought against the very traditions that now bound Rachel in chains of silence and obligation. "Sit down, dear," Eleanor said, her voice steady, despite the frailty of her body. She gestured toward a worn armchair, its upholstery frayed, but still holding the warmth of many stories shared within its embrace. Rachel sank into it, feeling the weight of her grandmother's gaze upon her. "I can't keep living like this, Grandma," Rachel confessed, her voice a whisper. "I thought I was marrying for love, for faith, but now I see it was all a lie. Samuel, he didn't choose me. I'm just a cover for his shame." Eleanor's eyes softened with understanding, and she leaned forward slightly, her gnarled hands resting on her knees. "Ah, sweet Rachel, lies can bind us tighter than any rope. But you must remember, silence is not a virtue when it hides the truth." Rachel felt a rush of emotions, anger mixing with sorrow. "But what can I do? I'm just one person. If I speak out, I'll be shunned like you were." Eleanor shook her head slowly. "And what good did my silence do? I lost my home, my community. But I gained my voice. It is never too late to stand for what is right, even if it means standing alone." The words hung between them heavy with the weight of generations of women who had suffered in silence. Rachel looked down at her hands, which had been so busy sewing a future that now felt like a mirage. "I don't want to cause a scandal, Grandma. I don't want to tear our community apart. Sometimes, my dear, tearing down the old is the only way to build something new. You carry within you the strength of all those who have come before. Do not underestimate your power to change the narrative." Eleanor's voice was firm, a ripple of authority that resonated within Rachel. "I just don't know if I have that strength," Rachel replied, her voice quivering. "What if they don't believe me? What if Samuel denies everything? I'll be left with nothing." Eleanor took a deep breath, her frail frame seeming to gain a little more solidity. "You will have your truth. And that, my dear, is more powerful than any lie. The community may resist at first, but truth has a way of echoing in the hearts of those who listen. You need to speak, not just for yourself, but for all the women who have been silenced. You are not alone." The fire in Eleanor's words ignited a spark within Rachel. "But how do I begin? I've been trained to keep my head down, to accept what is given to me. How do I fight against something so deeply rooted?" "Start by sharing your story, your truth," Eleanor urged. "Gather the others. Speak to the women who've been hushed. They will rally around you, and the men will listen. You may be surprised by who stands by your side." Rachel looked out the small window, where the last rays of the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden light over the fields. "I've spoken to a few women already. They've shared their stories with me, but we've all been afraid of the consequences." "Fear is a natural reaction," Eleanor replied, her tone softening. "But courage is not the absence of fear, it's the determination to move forward despite it. You have the opportunity to change the course of your life and the lives of others. Embrace it." Rachel's heart raced. The thought of standing before the community, of laying bare her pain and the pain of others, felt terrifying, yet liberating. What if I'm not strong enough? Strength comes from within, Rachel. You may find it in the stories of others, in the love you hold for them, and the desire for change. You must forge a path that is true to you. Rachel took a deep breath, her mind racing with possibilities. "I need to gather them, the women who've suffered, and share this with the men. They must hear us." Eleanor nodded, pride glimmering in her eyes. "Yes, that's the spirit. You must be the voice that echoes through the silence. Do not burden yourself with the fear of repercussions. What matters is the truth. Rachel felt a swell of gratitude towards her grandmother. Thank you for believing in me, Grandma. I felt so lost, but I think I see a way forward now. Eleanor smiled gently, the lines on her face deepening. You have always had this within you, Rachel. The courage to embrace your truth and to stand for what is right. Just remember, love is not found in silence and submission. Love is found in honesty and compassion. With a newfound sense of purpose, Rachel rose from the armchair, determination coursing through her veins. I won't let fear hold me back any longer. I'll gather the women and we will speak out. Together we will break the silence. Eleanor's face lit up with approval. That's my girl. Go forth with an open heart. You will not only find your voice, but also inspire others to find theirs. As Rachel stepped outside into the cool evening air, she felt a sense of liberation. The path ahead was fraught with uncertainty, but she was ready to embrace it. The stars began to twinkle overhead, and she realized that between the heavens and the earth there was a space for truth, justice, and the courage to love oneself fully. With each step she took away from her grandmother's house, Rachel felt lighter, as if the weight of generations had begun to lift. She thought of the women who had suffered in silence, the young ones who had been forced into roles that stifled their spirits. She would not allow that to continue. She would gather her sisters and mothers, and together they would weave a new narrative, one that would echo through their community like a symphony of courage and strength. And in that moment, Rachel Fisher knew she was no longer just a pawn. In a game of silence, she was a voice poised to break the chains of tradition and forge a path of hope and truth for all. Rachel stood in the dim light of Eleanor's living room, her heart racing as the weight of her grandmother's revelations settled around her like a heavy cloak. The walls, lined with faded quilts and old photographs, seemed to echo with the stories of women who had come before her. Women whose voices had been silenced under the weight of tradition and duty. Rachel. Eleanor said, her voice steady, yet tinged with emotion. You're not alone in this. We've all carried our burdens in silence, but silence is not a virtue. It's time to break the chains that bind us. Rachel's eyes brimmed with tears as she absorbed her grandmother's words. Eleanor, with her silver hair and time-worn hands, had once been a vibrant part of the community, a voice of reason and a beacon of courage. Now, excommunicated and living in the shadows, she embodied the very spirit of rebellion that Rachel had been too afraid to embrace. But how can I speak out? The community will see me as a traitor. Rachel whispered, her voice trembling. They'll turn against me and Samuel. He'll hate me. Eleanor leaned closer, her eyes piercing yet filled with warmth. Fear is a prison, my dear, and sometimes to find freedom, we must be willing to face that fear head-on. Remember, it was never just about you and Samuel. It's about all the women who have suffered in silence. You carry their stories too. Rachel nodded slowly, the flickering candlelight casting shadows on her face. The weight of Eleanor's words hung heavily in the air, and she couldn't shake the feeling that her life was about to change forever. Over the following weeks, Rachel visited Eleanor regularly, each meeting igniting a spark within her. They sat together, stitching quilts and sharing stories, weaving together the past and the present. Eleanor spoke of the time she dared to question the elders about the way women were treated in their community. The pain in her voice was palpable, a reminder of the sacrifices made for the sake of tradition. They didn't just excommunicate me, Rachel. They silenced me. But they can't silence the truth, Eleanor said one afternoon, her fingers deftly moving through the fabric. It will always find a way to surface. Rachel felt a swell of determination blooming inside her. If her grandmother could be so brave, Then perhaps she could find the courage to speak her truth. After all, she had witnessed the pain of so many women, her own mother, her aunts, and even her friends, who had suffered in silence just like Eleanor. One crisp autumn afternoon, while stitching a quilt made of colorful patches, Rachel decided it was time. She gathered her courage and approached women she trusted, those who had shared whispers of their own struggles in the shadows. At the weekly gathering to prepare food for the church, Rachel felt a renewed sense of purpose. She found herself in the kitchen with a group of women kneading dough and sharing laughter. It was a sacred space, filled with the scent of fresh bread and the sound of camaraderie. "Rachel," said Anna, a kind-hearted neighbor, "you seem different these days. What's on your mind?" Rachel hesitated, glancing around at the familiar faces. "I've been thinking a lot about our lives, about how we're expected to just accept things as they are." The other women paused, their hands stilling, as they exchanged glances. "What do you mean?" Miriam, the very woman whose presence had haunted Rachel since her wedding, asked, her voice tinged with curiosity. Rachel took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment. "I mean, we've all been told to keep quiet, to accept our roles without question. But what if we don't have to?" Anna's eyes widened, and the room fell into a heavy silence. "You're suggesting we speak out against the church, against our husbands?" "Yes," Rachel said, her voice growing stronger. "We have stories that need to be told. We can't hide behind our faith if it means sacrificing our truth. We deserve to be heard." The tension in the air was palpable as the women processed her words. Miriam shifted uncomfortably, her gaze dropping to the floor. "Rachel, you know what happened to Eleanor. They excommunicated her for speaking out," Miriam said quietly, her voice trembling. "But isn't that part of the problem? We're afraid of what they'll do to us." Rachel countered, her heart racing. "What if we stood together? What if we supported each other?" Anna nodded slowly, her expression shifting from uncertainty to resolve. "I've seen too many women suffer, Rachel. Maybe it's time for a change." With that, the atmosphere began to transform. The women started sharing their own stories, tales of heartache and longing, of dreams unfulfilled and voices unheard. They spoke of the expectations that had been placed upon them, the sacrifices made for the sake of family and tradition. As they shared, Rachel could feel the bonds between them strengthening, weaving a tapestry of solidarity and sisterhood. The kitchen, once filled with whispered fears, became a sanctuary of shared experiences and newfound courage. Days turned into weeks, and Rachel continued to meet with Eleanor, drawing strength from her grandmother's wisdom. The stories she gathered from the women of the community fueled her resolve, each tale igniting a fire within her. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, Rachel found herself sitting across from Eleanor once more. They were surrounded by bolts of fabric and half-finished quilts, a world of creativity and resilience. "Have you thought about what you want to say to the elders?" Eleanor asked, her expression serious yet encouraging. "I want them to know the truth, Grandma. I want them to hear our pain, our struggles," Rachel replied, her heart pounding with anticipation. "But I'm terrified of what will happen. What if they don't listen?" Eleanor reached across the table, taking Rachel's hands in her own. "You will speak for those who cannot. It may not be easy, but remember, the truth has a way of breaking through. You must believe in your voice." Rachel looked into her grandmother's eyes, seeing the strength and conviction that had carried Eleanor through her own battles. "I will. Do it, Grandma. I'll speak out for all of us." With a newfound sense of purpose, Rachel began to prepare for the meeting with the elders. She wrote down the stories she had collected, each one a testament to the pain and struggles of the women in her community. The words flowed from her heart, spilling onto the pages as she poured her soul into the narrative. As the day of the meeting approached, Rachel's heart raced with a mixture of excitement and fear. She knew that this was not just about her, it was about everyone who had ever felt trapped by silence. With each passing moment, she felt the weight of their stories on her shoulders, urging her forward. In the quiet of the night as she lay in bed, Rachel whispered a prayer. "Give me courage, give me strength. Let me be a voice for those who are afraid to speak." The next morning, as she prepared to confront the elders, she felt a sense of calm wash over her. She was no longer just Rachel Fisher, a young woman bound by tradition. She was a vessel of truth, ready to break the silence and forge a new path for all the women who had come before her and those who would follow. As she stepped into the meeting hall, Rachel took a deep breath, her heart steadying. She was ready to share her truth. She was ready to be heard. Rachel stood at the threshold of her grandmother Eleanor's modest home, the late afternoon sun casting a warm glow on the weathered wooden door. The air was heavy with the scent of wildflowers and the distant hum of cicadas. She hesitated for a moment, heart racing, before finally lifting her hand to knock gently. The sound echoed in the stillness, a soft plea for understanding. Eleanor appeared almost instantly, her frail frame wrapped in a faded shawl that had seen better days. Her silver hair was pulled back in a loose bun, and her blue eyes, though clouded by age, sparkled with life. "Rachel, dear," she said, her voice a soothing balm. "Come in, come in." Stepping inside, Rachel was enveloped by the familiar warmth of her grandmother's home. The walls were adorned with quilts and photographs, reminders of a life rich in stories but marred by silence. Eleanor gestured for Rachel to sit at the small wooden table, its surface scarred by years of use and love. "I've missed you, child," Eleanor said, settling down across from Rachel. "What troubles your heart today?" Rachel took a deep breath, the weight of her recent revelations crashing over her like a wave. "Grandma, I don't know where to start. Samuel, he didn't marry me for love. He was forced into it. Miriam is pregnant. And I—" Eleanor raised her hand gently, silencing Rachel with a gesture. "I know," she said softly. "I've heard whispers. The community is good at keeping secrets, but the truth has a way of slipping through cracks." Rachel's eyes widened in shock. "You knew, and you didn't say anything." "I was excommunicated for speaking out, Rachel." Eleanor replied, her tone firm yet compassionate. "I've learned that sometimes silence is the only armor we have, but it's not the armor you should wear. You have a voice, and it's time to use it." "But what if I'm punished? What if I lose everything?" Rachel's voice trembled, fear and uncertainty swirling within her. She had always been the obedient daughter, the good Amish girl. The thought of defying the community felt like stepping off a precipice. Eleanor leaned forward, her gaze intense. "You may lose what you think is everything, but you will gain so much more. Courage." Rachel is not the absence of fear, it's the will to act in spite of it. The truth is a powerful force. It may hurt, but it can also heal. Rachel nodded slowly, absorbing her grandmother's words. "I want to be brave, Grandma. But how do I do it? How do I tell everyone what really happened?" "Start small, my dear," Eleanor advised. "Share your story with those who are ready to listen. There are others, women who have suffered in silence. You may find allies among them. This is not just your battle, it's a fight for all those who have been silenced." Rachel's heart raced at the thought of speaking out, but a flicker of hope ignited within her. "You think they'll listen?" "Oh, they might surprise you," Eleanor said with a knowing smile. "Women have a way of recognizing their own struggles in one another. You must believe that your truth matters." As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting a golden hue over the room, Rachel felt a sense of resolve growing inside her. "I'll try. I'll talk to the others. But what if they don't understand?" "Then you keep speaking," Eleanor replied firmly. "You speak until they do. You have the love of your faith on your side. And you must remember that love can take many forms. It can be gentle, but it can also be fierce." Rachel reached across the table, grasping her grandmother's hand. "Thank you, Grandma. I feel like I'm awakening to something deeper. I need to protect my heart and the hearts of others." Eleanor smiled, her eyes misty with pride. "And in doing so, you protect your faith. You will not abandon it, you will redefine it." The two women sat in silence for a moment, the weight of their shared understanding filling the space between them. Rachel felt a bond with her grandmother that she hadn't fully recognized before, a connection forged through shared pain and the courage to confront it. "Promise me something," Rachel said abruptly. "Promise me you'll be there when I speak out. I need you by my side." Eleanor nodded, her face serious. "I promise. I may be old, but my spirit is strong and I will stand with you. We will face whatever comes together." The evening deepened, and Rachel left her grandmother's house with a newfound sense of purpose. As she walked back home, she replayed their conversation in her mind. She thought of the women in her community, her mother, her aunts, her friends, who had suffered in silence. Each step felt lighter, as if the weight of her secrets was beginning to lift. The following days were filled with quiet determination. Rachel began to reach out to the other women in her community, seeking moments when they could speak in hushed tones, away from the prying ears of men and the judgmental eyes of the elders. In the dim light of the barn, surrounded by the comforting scent of hay, she gathered a few close friends, Leah and Ruth. They sat on bales of straw, their voices barely above whispers. "Rachel, are you sure about this?" Anna asked, concern etched on her face. "I am," Rachel replied, her voice steady. "I have to be. We can't keep living like this pretending. Everything is okay when it's not." Leah looked around nervously. "If the elders find out, we could be punished." "But what about Miriam?" Rachel pressed. "What about the young women who are sent away or forced into silence?" "We can't. Let this continue. We have to speak our truth." Ruth nodded slowly. "I've felt it too, the pain of keeping everything inside, the shame of it all. I want to be free." Rachel's heart swelled at their words, at the recognition of shared suffering. "Then let's be brave together. We can support each other. If we stand united, we can begin to shift things." With each meeting, their bond deepened, and the whispers of their shared stories became a chorus of strength. They spoke of their dreams, their fears, and the unyielding pressure to conform to traditions that felt increasingly suffocating. As Rachel shared her own story of her forced marriage, of the secret that had shattered her dreams, she saw understanding in her friend's eyes. "You're not alone," Leah said softly. "We are with you." And so the seeds of change began to sprout, nourished by their collective courage to defy the silence that had gripped their community for far too long. Rachel realized that she was not just fighting for herself, but for every woman who had ever felt voiceless and trapped. With the strength of her grandmother's wisdom and the support of her friends, she was ready to confront the truth, no matter the cost.